and we post it afterwards. So if you need to leave early, or if you have other people in your office that weren't able to join, it'll probably be next week that we'll post it. And so today, what we're going to be talking about is our new partnership with the Agricultural and Food Law Consortium. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to add them into the chat box, and I'm happy to answer them as we go, and we can hold it to the end as well. Right now, we have everyone muted to cut down on interference, but we will unmute folks later on if there's questions. Okay. So for those of you who have been around since the National Sea Grant Law Center was established in 2002, you know that we have focused on aquaculture and fisheries management from the beginning. It's always been an area of focus for us, and we've done a number of advisory requests on aquaculture legal questions for sea grant programs and also NOAA fisheries. We had two rather large projects with NOAA fisheries looking at the permitting process for aquaculture operations in federal waters. About 5 years ago, we looked at permitting offshore mussel operations, shellfish operations, and then about 2 years ago, we revisited that and looked at it for offshore finfish aquaculture operations. So those were pretty big white papers that we did in coordination with NOAA fisheries. We've also done smaller research requests for sea grant programs over the years, looking at the impacts of proposed legislation, looking at what authority the states might have over aquaculture operations happening in federal waters, and just answering some questions on and off about jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act and other federal laws. For those that don't know about our advisory service, this is a service that we provide free of charge to the Sea Grant Network and the wider community, the NOAA line offices. We do have a page on our website dedicated to the advisory service, and all of the requests that we've done over the years are available on the website. So if you're interested in learning any more about the products that we've done so far, I encourage you to go and browse our website. And if you have questions about aquaculture or any other kind of legal issue that comes up in your work, please send us an email or give us a call. We're happy to talk about the program. And also next month, our webinar series will focus on the advisory service. We'll provide a little more information about how the process works and some of our recent questions that we've answered for programs. We've also done a couple of resource guides over the years in partnership with different organizations. We did a resource guide for community-supported fisheries, which was done in conjunction with a meeting that was being held in New Hampshire. I think it was back in 2013, 2014. So we worked with the planning committee to pull together a resource guide about the legal issues surrounding the operation of community-supported fisheries programs. We also received funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture through their risk management education program to put together a guide on direct marketing of aquaculture products in Alabama. And so we kind of have a diversity of products that we've worked on over the years. And again, all of these are available on our website as well. Well, the kind of the history of how we got to this new Agriculture and Food Law Consortium is that in 2010, we began working more closely with the National Agricultural Law Center at the University of Arkansas. And the National Agricultural Law Center is set up very much like we are here at the National Sea Grant Law Center, except they're funded by the National Agricultural Library, which is part of USDA, to provide legal research and information services to the agricultural community. So they work with attorneys that are representing farmers. They work with land grant extension agents. They have a wide network throughout the country. And I've included their website if you would like more information about their program. And since 2010, as I mentioned, we've worked on a number of projects. They were actually instrumental in helping us receive the money to do the aquaculture direct marketing guide. The National Agricultural Law Center has developed direct marketing guides for agricultural products for all the states in the country. Is actually a massive undertaking, and it deals with things like farmers markets and direct from farm sales. And so we modeled our marketing guide after their agricultural guides, but obviously focused on the kind of unique issues that come up in aquaculture and the direct sale of seafood. We also partner on an annual agricultural and environmental law continuing legal education conference, which I'll talk more about in a few slides. And so based on this work, that we realized that working together with the National Agricultural Law Center, that there's quite a bit of overlap on issues between sea grant and land grant. Obviously, if it deals with water, we were both working on issues with respect to water quality, nutrient management, water quality trading. The National Agricultural Law Center didn't have much expertise in aquaculture, so we were able to help them fill some of those voids. And over the years, there became an opportunity to pull a couple more organizations together to really form a consortium to try to address the agricultural and food law issues that were coming up in our respective communities. And so the consortium is a national multi-institutional collaboration designed to enhance and expand the development and delivery of authoritative, timely, objective agricultural and food law research and information. And what I wanted to point out is that we define agricultural and food law very broadly. It includes the land-based food, fiber, and energy production systems, as well as seafood and marine-based aquaculture. And so the National Sea Grant Law Center's contribution to the consortium is really the seafood and marine-based aquaculture. The consortium does also touch on catfish and freshwater production, and we will be looking at ways that we can kind of ramp up our activities on freshwater aquaculture to address issues in the Great Lakes. And so that's also, we should probably change it to marine-based to just aquaculture because it also includes freshwater. In addition to the National Sea Grant Law Center and the National Agricultural Law Center, the founding members of the consortium include the Center for Agricultural and Shale Law at the Penn State Dickinson School of Law, and Agricultural and Resource Law Program at The Ohio State University. So we also have Sea Grant, there's connections there with the Sea Grant land grant programs at both Pennsylvania Sea Grant and Ohio Sea Grant. And as part of the consortium, this is separately funded project by the National Agricultural Library that is enabling the Law Center to be able to expand our work in this area because we have an additional source of funding now that that we can kind of put our aquaculture work kind of in a different bucket. And so I wanted to take a few minutes to highlight some of the consortium's current projects. So what are some of the things that the consortium is working on? What are our major activities? One are webinars. So the consortium also has a webinar series, and they cover a range of topics that we consider important to the agricultural and food law community. The 1-hour webinars typically occur on the third Wednesday of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern. They're available to anyone. They're completely open to the general public, and they're designed to be for both attorneys and non-attorneys. So they're very accessible. We cover a wide range of topics, and I would encourage anyone that's interested in these issues to kind of look at the webpage, the consortium webpage, and see what topics are coming up. So here's the link to the webinar page. up at the top. As I mentioned, the webinar will be recorded, but we also share the PowerPoint slides. So if you're interested and want the slides, they will be available after the webinar. But here is just a sampling of the webinars that occurred last year. You can notice that I actually did 2 webinars last year. One was on biofuels and invasive species. This issue has come up because the biofuel industry is interested in a lot of novel feedstocks, many of which could be potentially invasive in different areas. There was a particular concern, Arundo-Donax, and there was a lot of controversy when the EPA approved that for kind of renewable energy credits under the state plans for those fuel sources. And so that webinar was looking at, what states were doing to try to minimize the risk that an invasive species could be introduced through the biofuel industry. And then I also did a webinar on animal welfare standards and commercial aquaculture operations. These have been emerging in Europe to have basically animal welfare, fish welfare standards. The United States primarily focuses on fish health and does not yet address other welfare standards such as their survival, like the comfort during transport, level of stress, how they're housed, humane slaughter, and so that focused on kind of what the European standards are and what might potentially be coming to the United States with respect to animal welfare standards in aquaculture. Here are just the new kind of what's coming up next on the webinar series. There is one like next week on kind of shale development or concerns about earthquakes from shale. Then we'll have a presentation on the USDA's National Appeals Division, which that's obviously of most interest to farmers with respect to crop insurance. So if they file a claim for crop insurance and are denied, they will end up in front of the Appeals Division. So that's a more targeted webinar. And then Alexandra Chase, who is the National Sea Grant Law Center's new Ocean and Coastal Law Fellow, will be talking about organic aquaculture standards. And as I mentioned, the partnership at the Consortium has brought some more funding into the National Sea Grant Law Center, and that has enabled us to fill our Ocean and Coastal Law Fellowship program for another 2 years and hopefully longer. And so Alex is our new fellow. She's a recent graduate from law school and has joined us to focus primarily on the consortium projects. So she'll be doing work mainly on aquaculture. And so her first research projects have been focusing on organic aquaculture standards, which aren't quite here yet in the United States, but the USDA has been looking at that. So if you're interested in that topic, join us for the webinar on April 20th. And also Alex has an article in the current issue of the Sandbar that talks about kind of where we are with respect to organic standards for aquaculture. So another big activity that the consortium has is our annual MidSouth Agricultural and Environmental Law Conference. It initially started, it was just a partnership between the National Agricultural Law Center and the National Sea Grant Law Center. So we were focusing on the MidSouth region, which is Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. And the goal is to provide resources in the form of presentations and to foster dialogue about a range of agricultural, food, and aquaculture issues for the agricultural community. We held our first conference in 2014 in Tunica, which is right outside Memphis, and then in 2015 we moved the conference to Memphis, and it's at the University of Memphis School of Law. And we have a web page for the conference. We're working towards kind of broadening the reach. This is our flyer for the next conference, which is right around the corner in April. It'll again be in Memphis. It's more coordinated and sponsored by the consortium than it has been in the past, and we're starting to broaden our reach a little bit and talk about whether or not we would be moving towards a national conference. So this year we're still focusing on the MidSouth, but we may be expanding it in future years depending on the directions the consortium takes. And so finally, I wanted to kind of wrap up and provide some time for discussion or questions about kind of where the National Sea Grant Law Center is fitting in currently. So we've done a lot of things in the past, webinars, and we've been working on this conference, but what exactly kind of new things are we doing because of the funding from the consortium? So I mentioned Alex's work with the organic standards for aquaculture and seafood, so that'll be a continuing research focus for us. I've gotten questions over the years from sea grant programs, especially along the East Coast, about local government authority over shellfish operations. As shellfishing or shellfish aquaculture has been promoted in states where it hasn't normally been as intensive, there's been some land use conflicts by neighbors not really wanting certain activities on neighboring property, or issues about using private docks for commercial operations, which has to do with local zoning codes. So we believe we'll be doing a project looking at kind of summarizing what is local government authority, kind of to govern activities or impact activities that are happening in the water. I think we'll also continue to work on the fish welfare standards and try to put together a project, a summary document that talks about those issues. We're also working with Peggy Hall, who is the partner from Ohio State, to look at nutrient management laws and policies, especially innovative programs that are happening on the state level to address nutrient management runoff from fields, which obviously contribute to the water pollution in downstream waters that any of us around the Chesapeake Bay or the Gulf of Mexico are very familiar with those issues. And so we've got a couple conference abstracts in looking for opportunities to present that work, and it may develop into something bigger in the future. Catherine Danasy, who is another attorney with the National Sea Grant Law Center, will be working on increasing some of our work on water quantity disputes. There are several going on in the Southeast. Of course, the most famous is the battle between Georgia, Alabama, and Florida over water withdrawals for Atlanta. But the state of Mississippi is also suing the state of Tennessee for groundwater withdrawals in the city of Memphis. And there are also some proposals and controversies happening in Louisiana. So we're kind of starting again to put out some information about that and increase our research in those areas. And then also I've been working for a while on trying to pull together some research on seafood fraud and traceability. And National Marine Fisheries Service just issued proposed regulations for kind of a traceability program run by the federal government that we're just starting to get familiar with what their proposal is. But stay tuned. We think that we'll at least have standbar articles and other things about those topics. And then finally, before we open it up for questions, just wanted to mention, if you're interested in getting more involved and you do research in these areas, or you know someone who could contribute, for instance, if you know someone at your law school or know somebody else that's kind of involved in law and policy issues that touch on these, the Agricultural and Food Law Consortium is currently seeking formal collaboration with individuals, organizations, and institutes that conduct research and outreach activities that support agricultural and food law research and information. The deadline for the pre-proposals is actually this Friday, so it's coming up pretty quick. The web address is there, and if you are interested or know somebody, I'm happy to forward you the formal call, and you can distribute through the networks. But that's something else that's going on, so that the consortium can add some more institutions and organizations that can help us achieve our missions. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. If you have questions, you can type them into the chat box, and then I'll repeat them and answer them if I can. So I'll just give folks a minute to see if there's any questions. Okay. Well, if not, it turned out to be a pretty short webinar today, since it's really just providing an overview of kind of what our general project is. We'll be reaching out, especially to the fisheries and aquaculture network, to get more input in the type of projects that we're thinking about. But again, if you have particular research questions, if there's law and policy things that you would like to have assistance with, please send me an email or reach out to me at any time. Even if it's too big for us to tackle right away, we're happy to work on grant proposals or think of other creative ways that we might be able to get your questions addressed, or to put you into contact with somebody in your state that might be better suited for answering your question as well. So I thank everyone for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you, and hope you'll join us next month for our webinar on the advisory service. So thanks.